My next guest joining me now from MichiganAutoLaw.com is Todd Berg. Todd, how are you today, sir?
Excellent. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing very well, and I just met you recently. We talked on the phone a couple days ago. We've corresponded back and forth via email, and I've just met you recently. But I've known Steve Gersten for decades, and Steve, of course, is one of the principals over there at MichiganAutoLaw.com. But you guys specialize pretty much in injury cases arising from when vehicles hit each other, auto accidents, trucks, motorcycles, that kind of thing. And I do tell people, if you have a case like that, call these guys, because your ad quotes somebody as saying you are arguably the best. I would remove the word arguably. I tell people these guys are the best. So there you go. Thank you for joining me today.
Very kind of you, Steve. Thank you very much. And yes, that is an apt, in terms of the work we do, that is an apt description. We appreciated being described as arguably the best. We would prefer your description instead. So I think that will be our official motto.
But as attorneys, of course, you've got to be, hey, we're quoting somebody, and they use the word arguably, so we'll go with that. But the reason I wanted to talk to you, and I remember years ago, I had a talk show in Flint, and I had Steve on via phone back in the old days of radio and talk shows. And we talked about no-fault law because it confuses a lot of people. And what's funny is I have a YouTube channel, and I talk to people around the country and around the world, and they go, no fault, what is that? And I try to explain it to people, and people think we're insane in this state because we have no fault law. Can you, just so my viewers don't think I'm making this stuff up, can you explain to the viewers the difference between no fault law and what normal states have with respect to auto insurance law?
Sure. So the difference between no fault law, there are states that have no fault systems like our state, and then there are other states that have what are called a pure tort system. We are one of 12 states in the U.S. that has a no-fault system. And the major difference between a no-fault system and a pure tort system is built right into our name. It's no fault. So if you're in a car accident in Michigan, you are entitled under Michigan's no-fault law to recover benefits that would pay for your medical bills, it would pay for your lost wages, it would pay for attendant care if you are unable to leave the house. It pays for all that stuff, regardless of whether or not you were at fault for causing the accident that resulted in your injuries that necessitated the medical bills and the lost wages. If you're in another state, like say Ohio, they are a pure tort state. And then if you want any of that stuff, you have to prove that somebody else caused the accident, and then you have to force them to pay. It's a drastically different system, and Michigan was, at one point, a pure tort state. Until 1973, we were a pure tort state. And the reason that we switched was because the pure tort system, and I know there's a lot of people that live that way, that live in states that have that system, and that's all fine. Michigan got to a point where they said, look, the pure tort system that we have in Michigan is not doing the job. People are getting seriously injured. They are having to wait way too long to get the payouts for lost wages and medical bills that they are entitled to from the at-fault drivers. Things are getting tied up in litigation for ages and years. And so car accident victims are having to wait. They're going into financial ruin because they have to go into their own pocket to pay all these bills. And what was happening far, far, far too often was who has $50,000, $100,000, $500,000 laying around to pay for medical bills in a serious car accident? Not many people. Very, very, very few. And that's what was happening. People were they were not getting the care they needed when they needed it. And for a lot of people, far too many, they were not getting it at all. And to the lawmakers, to the credit of Michigan lawmakers at the time, they said, hey, let's go to this no-fault system. And so we implemented no-fault. You get in an accident here, you collect your benefits from your insurance company. You do not have to prove who is at fault for the accident. That's only with regard to medical bills, wage loss, attendant care. If you want pain and suffering compensation from the at-fault driver who injured you, then you do have to go to court and you have to prove that they caused the accident.
And it's interesting because I had guessed it was the 1970s. I remember roughly when it happened, but I was not a car owner in 1973, so it didn't affect me directly. No. But I remember the debate about this, and the two issues were they said there'll be less litigation because your insurance company won't fight with you. And number two, they said it'll lower costs. Now, I don't believe it actually led to lower costs. And that's one of the things that people complained about. Maybe you can address that if you think it did or not. But didn't it just shift from instead of me fighting with their insurance company, now I'm fighting with my own insurance company?
Yes, it did. And I, too, was not counted among the driving public when this was passed. But, yes, those were competing interests in passing no fault. I think the lion's share of the concern was making sure that people were actually getting compensated. And yes, there was the idea that it was supposed to lower costs and reduce litigation. And I guess I've looked at it as well. It's kind of hard to say because the size of the driving population at that point was considerably different than it is now. And to compare like litigation rates, it is very difficult. When it's working well, it is a great concept because you have a relationship and a connection with your insurance company, and at least theoretically, they have an interest in making sure that you're okay and that you're happy, if for no other reason that they want you to renew your policy for the next 10 years. And so, it should have been easier, and it should have provided an easier system. I think we've gotten to the point now where it is difficult because there's a ton of gamesmanship going on, and we end up with a lot of lawsuits because insurance companies will just terminate. They don't always just flat out deny a claim. They'll let it, drag along a little bit, and then they cut it off, or they don't pay what they're supposed to, and then you got a lawsuit. And
so, with the change to no fault in 1973. I know that one of the things that became a part of that was there was a catastrophic claims fund that every person,
so glad you brought this up.
Every person paid money into this fund, and if you got a lifelong injury that's going to require just massive amounts of medical attention, like let's suppose you had a brain injury that was never going to get better, and it's going to put you in a hospital bed for the rest of your life. Someone's got to pay for that. And so they had a catastrophic claims fund that everyone put money into to pay those kinds of claims. And over time, people were complaining about the high cost of insurance. And I think that the insurance companies kind of pointed that catastrophic claims fund and said, well, that's kind of the problem. I don't know if it's a problem or not, but I do believe that that's one of the big changes in the recent no-fault updates, correct? That they, in essence, modified what's going to happen with those catastrophic claims?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up because I think it's a very interesting issue. Can I go back a little bit to when it was created? So no fault was passed in 73, and the idea when the way the law wrote at the time, the way the law read at the time was under no fault, if you're injured in a car accident, you are entitled to, it didn't say unlimited, but essentially it was unlimited medical benefits to cover all of your accident-related costs so long as they're reasonably necessary to your care, recovery, or rehabilitation from the accident. And so, so long as bills were reasonably necessary, insurance companies were on the hook to pay. And, insurance companies, they bill, they collect premiums, they amass, huge investments, huge war chests. They set aside reserves when the claims come in. Well, and sorry, I was going to be a little cynical there. So what happens about 5 years down the road, the insurance companies decide that they're really not all that thrilled about this setup. They're like, whoa, we're having to pay a lot of money here. I mean, these serious injury cases, that costs a lot of money. We really don't like paying that much money. We don't want to pay for a lifetime worth of medical care for these people. We think somebody else should do it. In comes the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association. So they're complaining about having to pay out on the policies that they took people's hard-earned money for the premiums. And instead of somebody saying, put your big kid's pants on and take care of the business that you voluntarily entered into, they said, no, it's okay. We're going to create this. So they created the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association. And what that does is, as you described, they collect money and they keep it in a fund, and it's used exclusively to pay for the medical care for catastrophically injured car accident victims. But the two important things to know are, one, all the funding that goes into the Catastrophic Claims Fund comes from drivers. We as drivers in Michigan fund it. Nobody else does. The insurance companies, they don't do it. When you get your insurance bill, if you're in Detroit, that $5,000 bill that you get, maybe anywhere from, in recent times, it could be anywhere from $100 or $200 of that bill, that's all, goes to the Catastrophic Claims Fund. And that is what entitles you to lifetime medical care if you're in a catastrophic injury, in a catastrophic accident, and your bills reach to a certain level. Because there's a retention level for insurance companies versus the catastrophic claims. If your medical bills get up to, just say like $500,000, that's kind of where we're at right now. Maybe it's a little higher. If they get up to $500,000, the insurance company wipes their hands and they send the case over to the catastrophic claims, and they pay from there on out. So for that $100 or $200 that is tacked onto your auto insurance bill, you're potentially, you are, and you're not potentially, you're paying for coverage in the event that tragedy strikes in your life. And so the insurance companies, I think, there's nobody that really speaks for the MCC, for the Catastrophic Claims Fund. And so I think they conveniently vilify the MCCA and say, oh, well, it's their fault that they're charging all this money. No, the lion's share of your auto insurance bill is your auto insurance.
And one thing I wanted to ask, and this is what people don't understand, is that if you are in an accident and the insurance company's going to pay your medical bills, we say, oh, that's fine. They get a bill, they pay it. But we don't think about those catastrophic claims, and no one wants to, because you don't want to think about it unless it happens to you, and you hope it doesn't happen to you. But I've read from Lawyers Weekly and other trade journals and magazines and articles, newspapers for lawyers, about some of the horrific injuries that people suffer and how costly they can be. And can you give me like a prototypical or like an example of what kind of injury we're talking about where somebody couldn't possibly afford to pay for the coverage otherwise without that claims fund being there? In other words, what kind of money are we talking about for somebody who's got the head injury I described and is in a hospital bed for the rest of their life? What kind of dollars are we talking about there?
We're talking huge dollars. For somebody that suffers a catastrophic injury, which generally speaking, would be a traumatic brain injury of some kind or a spinal cord injury that leaves them paralyzed. It's people that can no longer return to their normal life. They can't go back to work. They can't live independently. They can't take care of themselves. The injuries that they've suffered as a result of the crash renders their life completely changed. And the level of care that's required, it starts with going to an emergency room. It may involve surgeries. It involves seemingly unending rehabilitation, treatment facilities, residential care sometimes, in-home, around-the-clock care, respirators, nurses, doctors, surgeons, therapists, you name it. And for these people, for people who have to survive an injury like this, the bills can be $500,000, $1 million, more than that. Some people tragically are in a situation where they can't walk anymore. They're confined to a wheelchair. That requires, and to the extent that they're able to get out and about with the assistance of a wheelchair, They frequently have to have their vehicles modified so they can still drive them, or they need to get a new vehicle that can accommodate their wheelchair. A lot of them have to have their home modified so that they can get about, or they have to find new housing. All those costs are involved in this. The costs are so astronomical, it boggles the mind. And these numbers are not the kind of numbers that any private individual on any consistent basis could ever imagine paying.
And I know that one of the things that people have to stop to think about is that these accidents will happen. They will happen. We don't have self-driving smart cars yet that avoid accidents entirely.
No.
So if these accidents happen and these medical costs get incurred, they're going to get paid one way or the other. One way is to have them paid by the Catastrophic Claims Fund in the insurance pool. Or the other way is that when your insurance runs out and your money runs out and you go bankrupt, the government picks it up. So people who think that by eliminating the catastrophic... Pardon me?
Or you end up going without. Because if you run out of no-fault coverage and you have to shift over to your health insurance, there's a ton of stuff that you need in a catastrophic situation that your health insurance is not going to cover. And if you're catastrophically injured, you're not going to be able to keep your job for very long because you can't. There's a good chance you can't return to work. So your private health insurance through your job, that disappears. And then if you have to turn to Medicaid or Medicare, there's a host of things that those don't cover either. And or maybe you just don't have anybody that can help you navigate through this process, and you don't even get to any of those second, third, or fourth, plan B, C, or D.
Yeah.
Maybe you just when no fault runs out, it runs out, and then you have nothing.
And I've got friends who do bankruptcy law, and the number of people who are in bankruptcy from medical bills is shocking, and it's only going to get worse if they've eliminated the catastrophic claims here. So what were the changes that recently came in with the no-fault modifications that were recently passed? What all got changed?
Well, the biggest change was we went from a system where every driver in Michigan was required, everybody that was driving and that owned a car was required to purchase a no-fault auto insurance policy that carried with it unlimited medical coverage, which is what we've been talking about mostly today, which is if you were in an accident, your medical bills that are related to the accident would be covered no matter how much they were, so long as they're reasonably necessary for your care, recovery, or rehabilitation. That was changed. And that's the biggest, that is structurally, that is the biggest thing that was changed. We went from being required to carry unlimited to a system where people have four choices. You can stick with unlimited medical care. You can cap it at $500,000. You can cap it at $250,000. Or if you're on Medicaid, you can choose the lowest, which is $50,000 worth of no-fault coverage, and then Medicaid would carry over. Medicaid would kick in and pay for the rest.
Okay. And so I know they promised us with these big changes that we're going to see that the prices were going to drop, the premiums are going to drop. Do you know offhand, with respect to the whole state and the whole industry, on average, did the prices of insurance drop dramatically?
I've seen the press releases, and I've seen the statements saying that prices have dropped, and it sounds like prices have dropped. However, the fact of the matter is that Michigan as a state is still paying the highest rates in the country. Detroit as a city is still paying the highest rates of any city in the state or in the country. There has been a lot of talk about the savings, and I don't want to speculate about what people's intentions were or what they thought was going to happen or whether they thought any of the promises were ever going to be fulfilled. I probably should not say that.
Okay, but let me ask you.
I'll probably get in big trouble.
Let me ask you a question, though. One of the concerns I had was that the Catastrophic Claims Fund was a big pot of money. If the big pot of money is not going to be used anymore, where does that money go? Because there was a large amount of money in that pot when the law got changed.
Yeah. No. And there is a big pot of money. And the idea is that that money stays there so that it can be accessed and used to pay for benefits now and into the future. It is run a lot like an insurance company in the sense that a claim comes in, they assess the claim, they figure out, they ballpark based on what their actuaries tell them, how much this is going to cost over time. And so they keep setting that money aside so that it can be used for, maybe the next 10 years for this person, or if they think it's going to be longer, they have the money there. Well,
because my concern was that if the money was there, someone's going to say, well, gee, it's a surplus. Return it back to us, the insurance companies. And I don't know if that would ever happen, but that was the concern I had.
Well, you're right. And unfortunately, many people don't know about the Catastrophic Claims Fund. They don't know what its purpose is. They don't know who put the money there, which is drivers. And they don't know what it's being used for. And that's why several years ago, we had a lawmaker who said, hey, they got like $22 billion now over there in the Catastrophic Claims Fund. Let's just use all that to fix the roads. You can't do that. The money is set aside. It's paid for, and it is funded by drivers so that if tragedy strikes, they have the money there to cover them in the event that they need catastrophic medical care. Now, in terms of refunds or what happens to the money, there was a change under the new law. And under the new law, it said that if at some point the money that's being held in the fund, if the total being held is 120% of the liabilities that the MCCA has, they are authorized to issue a refund. They are authorized to send the money back to drivers. So what they would do is they would take the difference between. They would say, okay, look, the fund is liable for this amount right now going forward. We got to keep all that money in because that will pay the claims that we know of, and give us maybe some cushion to take in the new claims as they come in. But on top of that, we have this, and we're not using that right now. So they would slice that 20% off, and then they would send it back to the insurance companies, and the insurance companies would be obligated to send it back through to drivers.
Okay.
That's under the new law, and that would take effect in 2022. Okay. Currently, up to this point, there is no refund mechanism within the Catastrophic Claims Fund. It has been done. And in 1998, the insurance commissioner and I don't recall whether the governor was involved in it or not, they had a surplus. They had a $1.2 billion surplus in 1998. And the Catastrophic Claims Fund, their board of directors, voted to give that surplus back to drivers. And they did. And things were okay for about a year or so, maybe 2 years. And then after that, we ushered in about 10 to 12 years, over about the next 14 years, 10 to 12 of those years, the MCCA continued to run multi-billion-dollar deficits after that. That means, and the deficit, as you know, means that you are liable to pay people's bills, but you don't have that much money. So maybe they had $6 million in liabilities and all they had was $4 billion on hand. That meant that they were upside down almost $2 billion. And they did that for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's the danger of refunding or giving out money out of this MCCA, because you never know what's going to happen. Maybe there's a horrible year and there's, I hope it never happens, but maybe there's a horrible year and there's more catastrophic claims in 1 year.
Yeah.
And you've given away all your cushion.
Yeah. Well, I know that you and I talked about this previously, and you said that one of the things that the new law does is it empowers the insurance commissioner to stop excessive rates. Now, before you address that, I will let you know, I've done videos talking about how powerful the insurance commissioner is in Michigan and where they usually get those commissioners from, and how often the commissioners are former insurance company executives. And it seems to be a revolving door where you run an insurance company, you do that for a few years, and then you become the insurance commissioner in Michigan. And then after doing not a whole lot of anything, you leave and some other person who's running an insurance company becomes the insurance commissioner. And they almost never do anything that I've ever heard of. So when you tell me that they have the power to stop excessive rates, I go, okay, are they ever going to exercise that power? And I find that highly unlikely.
Well, you're right. It is highly unlikely for two reasons. One is structural, and the other might be just a lack of willingness. I would like to comment about what you said about the players and how they show up in different places. I may be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure that Kevin Clinton, who is currently the head of Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association, I'm pretty sure he was the insurance commissioner a few years ago. And interestingly, before that, he was the head of Pro National, which was a medical malpractice insurance company. So, I'm not sure what insurance commissioner Anita Fox's background is. I think it is in the insurance industry.
Yeah.
But to the other point about the insurance commissioner having the power to stop excessive rates, that power has been on the books for a while. And I think what would have been nice to see in this new law is some changes made so that the power actually had the power that was given on the page in the statute actually had some teeth to it. Because I think there's a good argument that that drivers are not seeing the savings from the change in the no-fault law, that they're not seeing those savings because the insurance commissioner doesn't have the power to actually enforce those, impose reductions. There were reductions that were part of the statute, but the insurance commissioner can only stop what's called an excessive rate if certain conditions are met. And the way the law is structured, it's never going to happen, because the insurance code says all auto insurance rates in Michigan shall not be excessive. That seems pretty straightforward, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to me like we'd have a pretty good argument just based on going to one of the consumer websites, which shows that we're paying the highest rates in the country. However, when you dig a little deeper into the statute, excessiveness for purposes of the insurance commissioner stepping in and going, whoa, you're charging way too much. The insurance commissioner would have to show, one, that the price or the premium or the rate was unreasonably high for the amount of coverage that's being offered. Okay. I mean, that makes sense. And that may be a hurdle that somebody could get over. However, even if everybody in the state agreed on that issue, the insurance commissioner still could not deem a rate excessive and stop it from going into effect unless the insurance commissioner found that there was no reasonable degree of competition in the auto insurance market in Michigan.
Okay. That seems kind of hard, yeah.
Good luck that ever happening. Linda Waters, who was the insurance commissioner some years ago, probably in the early 2000s, she did a report on this. She issued a report through her office talking about competitiveness. First, I think it was the first one that's ever been done. And at one point, they were supposed to be done all the time. They were supposed to be done every 2 years, but everybody just blew it off. They're like, we don't want to do that.
Well, one thing
probably sensed the futility of it.
One thing that we've discussed before, and I've heard a lot of discussion about this, is that now when you get the notice from your insurance company, especially the first one we got after the law changed, they said you've got some choices to make. And the implication is there's choices you can make that will save you money, or choices you can make that will give you better coverage but will cost you more money. What exactly are those choices, and what are the things that we're choosing among? Because I'm assuming they were all pretty much laid out in the statute, right?
Yes, it ties into the pitch that this new law was going to save people money. And when they talk about saving people money as a result of passing this new no-fault thing, it's not savings like in the conventional sense. It's not savings that you and I think of. Like when you see an ad on TV, they say, hey, come on in to ABC Warehouse and save on a TV. So the TV that would have cost $2,000, last month is only going to cost you $1,000. You're saving because you're paying less for the same product. That is not what's happening with no fault. They talk about savings, but it's not savings. You get to pay less if you're willing to accept less. And those are the choices that that people are being required to make when they go in to renew or apply for a new policy. And those choices are, do you want unlimited coverage? Do you want to cap your coverage at 500 or 250 or 50? And sometimes people say, well, I'll cap it because it's going to give me some savings. There are other considerations that go along with that as well. And that is, one, am I actually going to get any savings? Because the guaranteed savings that lawmakers talked about, those were only average. So that's the average that an auto insurance company had, the average rate that an insurance company was issuing, not individual people. So if you went into an insurance company and said, hey, I want the guaranteed savings that I get under this new law, they would say, well, you're not guaranteed anything. And frankly, under this new law, if we determine based on your driving history or something else, we can charge you more. The other thing that people need to consider when they're making these choices about whether they want to cap their no-fault coverage is the savings that people are supposed to be getting. So are considerably more limited, because there's a lot of talk that if you choose a lower rate for your medical coverage, it's associated with a 45% reduction in premium. So people think, wow, I'm going to pay 50% less on my premium. No, you're not. You're going to pay 50% less on the no-fault portion of your premium, which is about 35% of your premium. Right. So take that small little piece of your premium, cut that in half, and that's your savings. It's a far cry, and sometimes we say, you can't afford these savings. And what we're talking about is, if you cap your medical coverage at $250,000 or $500,000, that means that if you're in a catastrophic injury and you or a loved one is seriously injured and your bills are just blowing through the roof, when you hit that $500,000, it's up to you. You got to figure out what's going on. You got to figure out if you have health insurance or if you got Medicaid or Medicare or some other coverage, or you're independently wealthy, or you can sell your house, or you can something to cover those bills. Otherwise, they're not going to get paid. You can't sue anybody at that point. You can't sue your insurance company. You can't do any of that. Yeah. You could possibly sue the at-fault driver, but they're going to have their own liability limits, and how many people are so independently wealthy or own that many assets that they can cash out for $500,000 to give to somebody they just injured. Yeah. The other choice that you're mentioning relates to liability coverage. That is a good choice. Unfortunately, it's going to probably cost more money, but it's needed now. What they did was they increased the liability limits. It used to be $20,000 for an accident. Sorry. The liability limits used to be $20,000, $40,000, which meant that if you caused an accident and somebody was injured in that accident, your liability coverage would pay for up to $20,000. They increased that up to $250,000. You can still go with $50,000, but they increased the limits. Those, and you have a choice between whether you want to go with $50,000 or $250,000 in terms of liability coverage. That is a good thing, because right now, every one of us driving on the road is at a much higher risk and a much greater exposure if we sadly cause an accident and somebody's injured, because we've always been subject to having to pay pain and suffering compensation to somebody if we cause an accident and they're injured. We still have to do that. However, under this new law, if I cause an accident and I injure somebody and they only have $250,000 in medical coverage under their policy, but their bills are $500,000 or $1 million, they get to sue me for the rest of that. And only if I have a very robust liability policy am I going to be able to use my insurance to help take care of that liability.
Yeah, and so, like I said, a lot of people don't think about this stuff. They don't worry about it, and then it happens, and of course you hope it doesn't happen to you. But what's most troubling to me, and this is such a big overview thing, is that if you watch television in America, commercial TV, you see two sets of commercials. Pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies. And I, as a consumer protection attorney, am flummoxed watching insurance commercials because all they say is, we can save you money. You can get a policy from us in 15 minutes and save 15%. And what other product out there does someone literally say, you can buy this and I'll sell you this for less than they'll sell it to you for? Because that assumes that these things are equal, number one. And the most important thing about your insurance isn't the cost. It's whether they'll pay a claim. And no one, that's right. I used to actually admire were the good hands people, because at least it made sense to me that they were selling the product. The product is, we will take care of you. Apparently they've discovered nobody cares. All anybody cares about is how short the phone call is, how funny the lizard is, and whether I'll save 15%. And I'd rather pay more and get my claim paid than pay less and have them deny me. And that's something I've watched evolve over the last few years, and it just absolutely, it disturbs me, to put it lightly. Oh,
I agree. I think there should be some rule in the truth in advertising legislation or something, which says that anytime an insurance company puts an ad on TV, they should also have to flash on there what their loss ratio is, to let people know how much of every premium dollar they get goes back out in payouts on claims. That, I think that would speak volumes to people. And unfortunately, there is too much focus. Nobody's at fault. I mean, consumers are not at fault. There's too much focus on how much it costs. And there's a drastic downplaying of the chances that you may actually have to need this coverage. I think it's kind of a wink. It almost feels like a wink and a nod sometimes, like, oh, you're required to buy this insurance, but who really ever needs their insurance? So just worry about the price. We'll give you a good price and you'll be on your way.
Especially the ads that sell.
And that is all fine and good if nothing ever happens.
Yeah, it's like the ads that sell the PLPD, which is just enough to get you on the road. Mm-hmm. And they say, hey, you can call us right now and pay us $20 and we'll send you a proof of insurance. And everyone knows that's aimed at people who have no intention of ever paying a second payment. They just want to get the proof of insurance so they can get the plate. And that, I watched those ads also, and I'm like, oh, it's so sad. But I guess one of the takeaways here is that the savings in the no-fault update is that it's not that you're saving money on the same product. They're simply allowing you to buy a less expensive product in exchange for the more expensive product you were buying before. Is that a good summary, do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You're right. You're not saving. It's a trade-off.
Okay.
You want to spend less, you get less. If you want to, if you only want to spend $5,000 on a car, you don't get to get a Lamborghini. And, if you're paying Lamborghini prices and you don't want to do it anymore, you don't get to drive that anymore. And that is the thing that is not made clear from any of this. When people talk about savings, when lawmakers talk to the public about you're going to save money, they don't say, we're going to allow you to pay less, but you're going to get a lot less. And that's the kicker. I mean, that's one of the really sad parts about this.
Yeah.
Is people just they don't see that. And unfortunately, people don't realize the significance of that until something happens, and then they're lost.
Now, let me ask you another question, and I like to ask this question just to make sure that people have a full understanding of this. And that is that no-fault insurance causes some rather unusual aspects, but also the law itself contains this. Let's suppose that I can't afford insurance, but I decide to drive anyway. And I would never recommend this, but we hear about people who've got no insurance because they can't afford it. They're out there driving one day on a bright, sunny day, and a drunk driver speeding runs through a red light and T-bones their car. And that person's got insurance, but you don't. What are your odds in court on that case?
It depends on if you're talking about your odds of losing.
Yeah,
they're 100%, because in the scenario you paint is really is such a tragic one, because if you are driving your own car and you're the owner of it and you don't have insurance on it, you are in for a world of hurt. From the criminal side, it's a misdemeanor. You could potentially go to jail, pay a fine. That's just the beginning of the nightmare, because if you're in that accident and you're driving your own uninsured car, say you're injured too, you are disqualified from recovering no-fault benefits. You're disqualified from the mini-tort, which would allow you to recover damages from the at-fault driver to put your car back together. You are disqualified from suing the drunk, speeding, at-fault driver who injured you. You're disqualified. There's no lawsuit. You can't do anything. And the kicker, the insult to all this injury, is that under Michigan law, if you are uninsured, if you're driving your own uninsured vehicle and you cause an accident and somebody else is injured, even this drunk speeding driver who's at fault, his or her insurance company can turn around and sue you to recoup whatever that insurance company pays out for that person's medical bills, wage loss, any kind of no-fault benefits.
And I've tried telling people that. I say you have to understand the risks you take. But I also shared office space with attorneys who did auto neg, and every now and then somebody would come in with what sounded like a great case because of these horrific injuries. Oh, by the way, I don't have car insurance. And it's like,
that's it.
You don't understand. The lack of car insurance is an absolute bar to your legal action. And then, as you point out, other bad things can happen to you. Very quickly here, and we're running out of time, believe it or not, mini-tort is something you mentioned, and I've talked to people before. There's a car accident that's not their fault, and they've got to pay a deductible, and it bugs them. Well, mini-tort says that you can go after the at-fault driver for a small amount of money to, in essence, cover your deductible. Yeah. And I got rear-ended by somebody a little over a year ago, or 2 years ago, maybe now, and they sent me a check for $500 because if I didn't get that from them, I was going to sue them for it, and they sent it to me. Did the mini-tort amount change with the new law? And what is it now?
It's $3,000.
Wow! Now they change it.
I'm sorry.
I said now they change it.
Yeah, right. Well, the mini-tort allows you to recover from the at-fault driver your vehicle, the equivalent of your vehicle damage repair costs up to $3,000. But that only counts for damages that are not covered by insurance. So I think like if you have broad form collision coverage, which pays for your coverage regardless of whether you're at fault, and also waives the deductible, you wouldn't have any claim for mini-tort because everything else would be covered by insurance.
Okay. And go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and one last thing, we've got about 3 minutes here. I know that in the old days, no fault was written in such an odd way that it treated motorcycles differently than automobiles in some respects. Do those differences still exist? And if so, can you summarize them fairly quickly?
Sure. no fault does not apply to motorcyclists. If you're a motorcyclist and you're driving your own motorcycle, you are not required to buy no fault benefits. You are required to buy liability coverage, but you're not required to buy a policy that provides no fault benefits. You're not entitled to it as a motorcycle driver. So if I'm driving my own car and I hit a tree and I get injured, it's a single car accident, I can claim no fault benefits through that. If you're riding your motorcycle, you hit a tree, single motorcycle accident, there will be no fault benefits that help you there. If you're riding your motorcycle and you hit a car hits you, then you will be entitled to no fault benefits.
Okay, so it's going to require the intervention of an automobile in the accident to create those kind of coverages.
The only way you're going to be able to recover no fault benefits if you're riding a motorcycle is if you're in an accident involving what's defined as a motor vehicle under the no fault law.
Okay, and they've exempted the motorcycles from the definition of motor vehicle, which is one of those crazy things that only lawyers and legislators would do. And I can tell you, I've known people who do motorcycle law. I've actually referred a couple motorcycle cases to you guys. And the sad part is, and don't get me wrong, I love motorcycles. I love bikes. I've ridden a few, but unfortunately the accidents can be so horrific and some of the injuries are insane in terms of how far off the charts they are compared to what the same accident would be if it was a car versus car versus a motorcycle, and those can be really bad.
Yeah, I agree. They're very sad.
Okay. Well, Todd, I'm going to thank you. I think you mentioned to me you weren't sure if we could talk for a whole hour, and I said, wind us up and watch us go. But, like I said, I'm familiar with no-fault insurance simply because by osmosis I pick up a little bit talking to other attorneys, and I read the papers and so on, and I've got insurance on my own cars. But I wanted to bring you in because you work at MichiganAutoLaw.com. I've known Steve Gersten since he was in junior high school, and I know that Steve's a big guy over the firm now, and I've literally known him for longer than he's been an attorney. And I do tell people, and this is the honest truth, that if I was in a car accident, I'd call you guys. When people call me, say, Steve, who do I call? These guys. Call these guys. What about no? Call these guys. Just trust me. It's one of the few things that I know to be an absolute carved in stone truth is that if there's anybody who can do the job, it's you guys. So I'm glad you came on here and talked about it a little bit with me today.
Thank you very much, Steve. We're proud to be thought of that way. And I will say that I've known Steve for quite a while, and he's a great guy, and he runs an excellent law firm. He's
thank
really
you.
Tremendous guy.
And I will have you back on again somewhere down the road if we have updates or questions, or the law gets changed, or if we ever get those rebates they keep promising us, maybe we'll talk about those too.
I'm not going to hold my breath.
Okay. Thank you very much, Todd.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
Yep, we'll talk to you soon. I'm Steve Lehto. This is mymytv.com, mymytv.com. If you want to zoom in, feel free, and we'll put you on the air. And I will be back tomorrow, same time, same place, and we'll do it again.